السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله على إحسانه والشكر له على تفضله وامتنانه، ولا إله إلا الله تعظيما لشأنه، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله داعي إلى رضوانه وعلى آله وأصحابه وإخوانه. أما بعد. إخواني في الله, we mentioned in the previous lessons that every soul shall certainly test death. No soul will escape death. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَائِقَةُ الْمَوْتِ. Every single soul shall test death. If there was someone who will escape this death, it would have been the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed to him, إِنَّكَ مَيِّتٌ وَإِنَّهُمْ مَيِّتُونَ, that verily you shall die and they will die. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا جَعَلْنَا لِبَشَرٍ مِّن قَبْلِكَ الْخُلْدَ أَفَإِن مِتَّ فَهُمُ الْخَالِدُونَ كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَائِقَةُ الْمَوْتِ. Every single soul shall test death. So each and one of us will test death. The topic we mentioned previously is that Israfil alayhi salam, an angel of Allah Azza wa Jal, he has been appointed to blow the trumpet. Currently the trumpet is on his mouth and he's facing up to the Arshur Rahman, waiting for the command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, "O Israfil, blow the trumpet." And Israfil will blow the trumpet, and everyone who remains on the face of earth shall die. And none shall remain for a period of 40 except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. 40 years, 40 centuries, 40 months, we do not know. Then Israfil alayhi salam will blow the trumpet a second time, and all of us will come out of our graves. We said, when we die, our body is eaten by the earth. Every part of our body is eaten by the earth, except for a bone at the back here, a round bone called the coccyx or the tailbone. That is the only bone that remains. And in that period of 40, between the two times the trumpet is blown, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring down rain. And ikhwani fillah, all of us, from that little bone that remains of us, our whole body will grow. Our whole body will grow. The bones, the skin, everything will grow. And then the trumpet will be blown the second time by Israfil alayhi salam. فَإِذَا هُمْ قِيَامٌ يَنْظُرُونَ. We shall all be coming towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be held accountable for our actions. We said that this body of ours that is resurrected on the day of judgment is the same body, but it has some differences. Number one, it is a body that will not test death ever again. That death was your last death. Be it an evil end or a good death, that was your last death. There shall be no death again. وَيَأْتِيهِ الْمَوْتُ مِنْ كُلِّ مَكَانٍ وَمَا هُوَ بِمَيِّتٍ. You shall not test death ever again. Be it you amongst the people of Jannah or amongst the people of Hellfire, death, that's one difference with your body. The second difference, you shall not urinate, you shall not defecate, you shall not spit. And number three, you shall be able to see with your eyes creation of Allah Azza wa Jal that you have never seen before. So the trumpet is blown, ikhwani fillah, and our bodies have returned back as it was, except with some small differences. And we said the very first person to come out of the grave is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. But he will not be sure. He'll see Musa alayhi salam, that Musa is next to the Arsh. So that's the first man. Then all of us will start coming out of our graves one by one. You'll see creation of Allah Azza wa Jal. You'll see the people of Ad, people who were giants. You'll see Adam alayhi salam, who was at least 35 meters tall. If he was playing basketball right now, I don't know how fair that will be. Adam alayhi salam, 35 meters tall alayhi salam. You see all the creation, all the animals, everyone will be resurrected on the day of judgment. But you as a human being, when you're resurrected, you also have another three attributes. You shall be resurrected uratan, hufatan, ghurlan. Three attributes. Number one, you will be naked, no clothes. Number two, you will be gurlan, you will be uncircumcised. And number three, you shall be barefoot, no shoes. Listen to our mother Aisha radhiallahu anha. She asks, Ya Rasulullah, you mentioned on the day of judgment that the people will be resurrected naked. Ar-rijal wa nisa, the men and the women, ينظر بعضهم إلى بعض, they look at each other. Look how pure this lady is, radiyallahu anha. The only thing that worries her on the day of judgment is her hishma, her respect, her hijab as a lady. How then, O Prophet of Allah, that on the day of judgment, that the women and the men will be resurrected naked, all of them? The Prophet ﷺ, he replies, Ya Aisha, O Aisha, the affair of that day is greater than for people to bother looking at anyone. You see the sun there, you see the moon there, you see the stars falling down, you see the oceans burnt, you see creation of Allah Azza wa Jalla you've not seen before. Then you think you'll be looking at Miss Universe or Miss World. You think you'll bother with that? You will not bother. For the fear, the tremor, the anguish of that day is greater for even the men to look at the women. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shall honor His servants, and from amongst the very first of His servants that shall be dressed on the day of Qiyamah is the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. The very first Prophet of Allah Azza wa Jal that will be given a cloth on the day of judgment. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he says, Inna awwala khalaiqin yuksa yawm al-qiyamah Ibrahim al-Khalil. That the very first person who shall be dressed, or who shall be clothed on the day of judgment is the Prophet of Allah, the friend of Allah, the Khalilur Rahman, Ibrahim alayhi salam. We mentioned in yesterday's lecture, Khani Fillah, and we shall mention later on, as Muslims, there's no competition between prophets. لا نفرق بين أحد منهم ونحن له مسلمون. We do not have any competition. We don't say, the hadith says Ibrahim. No, it is Muhammad who will be dressed first. The hadith says Ibrahim alayhi salam. And we believe what the hadith says without any competition. Are you together? When we say the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam is the best of the creation, we are not saying it in terms of competition. If someone asks you, who is better, Muhammad or Musa? What is your reply? As Muslims, we do not cause any competition with prophets. But if you're talking generally speaking, the Prophet ﷺ is the best of the creation. Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he narrates that Ibrahim ﷺ shall be clothed, number one, from the clothes of Jannah and given a place next to the Arshur Rahman. Then the Prophet ﷺ will be given. Question: why is the Prophet Ibrahim ﷺ the very first one to be clothed on the day of judgment? Who knows? Who can think of any answer? No. Yeah. MashaAllah. We have scholars in the mosque, alhamdulillah. He says, and that's the correct answer, is when the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he was thrown by his father and his people into the fire, they say most likely he removed his clothes. And he was ashamed on that day. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to show him and show all the creation how He honors Ibrahim alayhi salam on the day of judgment. The scholars also say that Ibrahim alayhi salam was the closest to Allah Azza wa Jal, the most fearful of Allah Azza wa Jal. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands him, O Ibrahim, I've given you a son. Ya bunayya inni ara fil manami anni adhbahuka fanzur madha ترى قال يا أبت افعل ما تؤمر ستجدني إن شاء الله من الصابرين. The Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, one day he sleeps. He's happy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him a son after 80, 90 years. Then Allah reveals to him, O Ibrahim, go take your son and take a knife and slaughter him like you slaughter sheep. So Ibrahim alayhi salam, he tells, oh my son, I've seen in a dream that I have to slaughter you. What do you think? The son says, oh my son, do what Allah has commanded you. You shall find me amongst the patient people. Does any of us have that iman? Honestly speaking, of Ibrahim alayhi salam. He goes with his son and is about to slaughter. Allah tells him, قَدْ صَدَّقْتَ رُؤْيَا. You have gone as the dream requested you. You have confirmed your faith. Take this sheep and slaughter it, and that becomes the sunnah for you and the Muslims after you. So the scholars say this man, his iman was like a jabal. It was even more than a mountain. He was one of the most fearful of Allah. That is why he's raised to the highest level of closest to Allah. Khalil. There's Mahabba Habib and there's Khalil. Khalil is the highest level. And only two people have reached this level of Khalil. The Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, and in the end of the life of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he reached this level of Khalil. So the first person to be given clothing on the day of judgment is the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. The final issue, you're attacking, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, يَوْمَ تُبَدَّلُ الْأَرْضُ غَيْرَ الْأَرْضِ وَالسَّمَاوَاتِ وَبَرَزُوا لِلَّهِ الْوَاحِدِ الْقَهَّارِ. That on the day of resurrection, the earth that you're resurrected upon, it's not the same earth that you left. That's what the verse in Surah Ibrahim says. It says, the day the earth is changed to an earth not like the one you left before. Question: does this mean that you shall be resurrected on a different planet? Some scholars have understood that this means that the resurrection will not occur in this dunya, based on this verse. يَوْمَ تُبَدَّلُ الْأَرْضُ غَيْرَ الْأَرْضِ وَالسَّمَاوَاتِ وَبَرَزُوا لِلَّهِ الْوَاحِدِ الْقَهَّارِ. They say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will transport us or resurrect us in a different world. But this is not correct. If you look in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, إِذَا زُلْزِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ زِلْزَالَهَا وَأَخْرَجَتِ الْأَرْضُ أثقالها وقال الإنسان ما لها يومئذ تحدث أخبارها بأن ربك أوحى لها. The day the tremors occur, the earthquake occur, the earth will remove its secrets or its wealth or its goods. And the people will be wondering what's happened to this earth. That's the day we shall be coming out of يَصْدُرُونَ النَّاسَ أَشْتَاتًا. We come out in groups and in teams or in families. So the earth that you are going to be resurrected, ikhwani fillah, is this earth. But it's not the same earth that you left. The Prophet ﷺ, he says in an authentic hadith, يحشر الناس يوم القيامة على أرض بيضاء عفراء كقرصة النقي. قال سهل أو غيره ليس فيها معلم لأحد. He says the people will be resurrected. The people shall be resurrected on the day of judgment on a land that is like a white piece of bread with some reddish. It has some reddish. And there is no landmark. There's no point you can say, there's a mountain there, there's a hill there. There's nothing to indicate even location. It looks the same. It's a flat land like a piece of bread, white bread with some reddish tinge. So, ikhwani fillah, the earth that you are going to be resurrected is the same earth, but the earth will have changed. And we shall look later at all the things that will change upon this earth. However, before you enter Jannah, you have to go through the last trial we're going to mention. You shall go through a bridge, a sirat, that is thinner than a piece of hair. You see this piece of hair? Who can see this piece of hair? Thinner than this piece of hair. And sharper than a sword. Thinner than a piece of hair. Sharper than a sword. So you and every single believer shall have to cross this bridge. And this day, everything is dark. There's no light. And the only light that you have are your good deeds. Those are the things that will guide you. Some people will fast like lightning bolts. Some people like a horse. Some people will crawl, and some people shall fall in the hellfire. For this is a bridge for you to cross into Jannah, you have to cross over the hellfire. So some people will fall to the hellfire on that day. But the people who are crossing, when they turn around, they shall see that the earth is no longer the earth that they left before. It has changed completely. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, in the hadith of Thawban, he says, أين يكون الناس يوم تبدل الأرض غير الأرض والسماوات. He was asked by a Jewish man, where will the people be on the day the earth is changed or turned to an earth that is not the same earth? فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم هم في الظلمة دون الجسر. They shall be in the darkness near the bridge. They shall be in the darkness near the bridge. So, ikhwani fillah, this is the day of resurrection. This is the day of judgment. In the forthcoming lectures, we shall look at the horrifying nature, at the torment, and how the earth and everything else turns on the day of judgment. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.